In 2015, in Paris, France, two French-born Algerian Muslim brothers murdered 12 people and injured 11 others. They targeted the French weekly magazine Charlie Hebdo. Why? Because a satirical magazine lampooned the Prophet Muhammad. Because a cartoon of a religious figure so enraged and offended their faith that they felt compelled to slaughter as many human beings as they could. Was this an isolated event? The only time religious extremists rained down violence in the name of their God? Ask Salman Rushdie. Watch the movie Hotel Mumbai. Read up on ISIS in Iraq and Syria, the Taliban in Afghanistan, Al-Shabaab in Somalia, and Boko Haram in Nigeria. It's a blight on the world, and it makes things much, much worse. Welcome back, and thank you for wanting to know the facts and the truth. What's going on in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is big. You can't miss it on the news. You can't miss it on college campuses, and you really can't miss it online. But what are the facts? Why is this happening? That's what we're here to answer. Our approach is to examine the major themes and focus on the important events that help you make sense of what's happening today. We care about knowing the truth. We also care about the basic human right to live in peace. We care about ending the suffering. We care about finding justice. And we think you're here because you do too. The only path for us then is to go after the facts and be open to what they show us. Life can be beautiful without hatred, violence, and war, and maybe the way there starts with better understanding each other. Better understanding the Jewish people, the Palestinian people, the history of their conflicts and past peace efforts, and some of the major issues standing in the way of forging real peace. What the Hell is Going On in Gaza is a 9-part series made up of 30 episodes, each designed to help you understand a different but important part of the picture. Over the next 3 episodes in Part 7, we'll look into the things that make the situation much, much worse. They are real problems that have a really significant effect. Here's what we'll cover. Episode 25, Religious Extremism. Episode 26, Irresponsible and Biased Media. And Episode 27, The United Nations and NGOs. Here in Episode 25, we'll take a look at religious extremism and talk about how it's making things worse in an already violent and bloody conflict. Let's get started. Unfortunately, religious extremism is a major factor making things worse in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It exists on both sides, though definitely not equally. Let's start then by talking about the form of religious extremism that causes the most harm: Islamism. Wikipedia's definition of Islamism is, quote, Islamism is both a religious and political ideology seeking to achieve the global domination of Islam and Islamic culture as the main religion and social relations for all peoples and societies. Hamas is a militant Islamist group. Let's talk about what Islamists believe. They believe that martyring oneself is desirable. Killing Muslim civilians is not bad because they go to paradise. Killing non-Muslim civilians is acceptable as a response to murdered Muslims. And killing Jews is both necessary and appropriate. The problem is not just that these beliefs are morally reprehensible. The problem is also that these beliefs preclude the possibility of peace with non-Muslims. We'll say that again. Islamists do not want peace with non-Muslims. The list of Islamist terrorist groups is frighteningly long. In addition to Hamas, here are just a few notable examples. Al-Qaeda, which was responsible for the 9/11 attack on America. The Taliban, who sheltered Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda and are responsible for a considerable amount of misery for the people of Afghanistan. In particular, they have brutally suppressed women. ISIS, or the Islamist State, is an Islamist terror group that by the end of 2015 ruled an area with an estimated population of 12 million people. During its rule in northern Iraq, it committed genocide against Yazidis, persecuted Christians and Shia Muslims, and publicized videos of beheadings of soldiers, journalists, and aid workers. The group also perpetrated massacres in areas outside its control. This photo shows the destruction in Raqqa, Syria, following the U.S. and allies' fight to defeat ISIS. Boko Haram, a branch of the Islamic State, is an Islamist terror group operating out of Nigeria and in surrounding African countries. It has killed tens of thousands of people in attacks against the police, armed forces, and civilians, resulting in the deaths of more than 300,000 children, and has displaced 2.3 million civilians from their homes. Hezbollah is an Islamist terror group that is armed, trained, supported, and controlled by Iran. Hezbollah has attacked Israel almost non-stop since its creation in 1982. It is believed to have between 150 and 200,000 rockets and over 100,000 fighters. Lashkar-e-Taiba is a Pakistan-based Islamist terror group and was responsible for the horrific attack in India portrayed in the movie Hotel Mumbai. Its goals include establishing Islam as the dominant way of life in the world, forcing disbelievers to pay, exacting revenge for killed Muslims, defending all Muslim states, and recapturing occupied Muslim territory. It has declared the U.S., India, and Israel, quote, existential enemies of Islam. The point is that Islamist groups like Hamas do not seek peace. They seek the domination of Islam and Sharia law worldwide, achieved through jihad. They murder and they destroy. There is no peace or compromise that is acceptable to them. Their views leave no room for the existence of those who oppose them or stand in their way. And what about Israel? What are Israel's problems with religious extremism? First of all, while Israel does have its own issues, there is no comparison between Israel and Hamas. Israel is a nation trying its best to achieve peace and security for its citizens, making mistakes sometimes, but not ever with evil intent. Hamas is an abominable terrorist, acting in every case with evil intent. Israel tries to minimize harm to its people and its enemies' people. Hamas specifically seeks to maximize harm both to its enemies' people and, incredibly, to its own people. There are legitimate criticisms of Israel, as there are of any country, but likening Israel to Hamas is absurd. Israel's principal issue is with the political influence and actions of its religious right. Israel's religious right are certainly not terrorists, but they do hold views and take actions that are highly detrimental to the possibility of peace with Palestinians. Some in Israel's right wing believe that Palestinians should be expelled from all the historical lands of Israel, including Gaza and the West Bank. When these individuals and groups are vocal, or worse, it fuels the fire of division and mistrust among both their supporters and Palestinians. So, why do extremists have a role in Israel's government and a constituency among Israeli voters? As terrorism and the relentless commitment to Israel's destruction by groups like Hamas have worn on, many Israelis have lost their hope for peaceful coexistence. Hamas, as well as Iran, Syria, Hezbollah, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, Islamic resistance in Iraq, the Houthis, and so many others don't just talk ceaselessly about destroying Israel, they attack over and over again. The bottom line is that the increased presence of religious extremists in Israel's current government reflects a discouraged electorate. A significant issue is the continued settlement of Israelis in the West Bank. According to Wikipedia, as of January 2023, there were 144 government-authorized Israeli settlements and an additional 100 unauthorized settlements, also called outposts, in the West Bank territory that has been held by Israel since the 1967 war. There are a smaller number of settlements in East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights as well. Nearly 700,000 Israelis now reside there. There are none in Gaza. The United States has designated these Israeli settlements as illegal, as has the extremely anti-Israel United Nations, unsurprisingly. Not all who support Israel's right to build settlements in the West Bank are religious extremists. Some believe that all of the historic land of Israel should belong to Israel today and don't find compelling the argument that the people who call for their extermination and keep attacking them and refuse to accept past peace offers of that land should now be entitled to it. Nonetheless, it's apparent that Israel's religious extremists are a driving force behind expansionist policies and actions. Like so many right-wing groups in other countries, including the United States, the UK, and in Europe, those in Israel often justify policies and actions that are not supported by law by claiming what they do is what their religion calls them to do and entitles them to do. Their presence is an impediment to peace and a problem for both Israelis and Palestinians. Here we see one such extremist politician, Ben-Gvir, pulling a gun on Palestinians in East Jerusalem. A February 2024 editorial by the Jerusalem Post called on Ben-Gvir to just shut up, saying, quote, Ben-Gvir has been an inflammatory force, leading members of the current government to speak in a divisive and toxic manner, with center-right politicians speaking violently or harshly. Like Ben-Gvir, current Israeli Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich is another extremist politician with strong expansionist views. Reuters quoted him in March 2024, saying, quote, while there are those in Israel and in the world who seek to undermine our right to Judea and Samaria and the country in general, we promote settlement through hard work and in a strategic manner all over the country. It's worth noting that many Israelis disagree intensely with these policies and have been protesting in historic numbers, filling the streets of Israeli cities. According to Haaretz, a leading Israeli newspaper, Smotrich again made outrageous and inflammatory comments, this time regarding Gaza. Haaretz wrote the following, quote, Israel's far-right finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, joined a growing list of senior lawmakers who expressed support for a large-scale transfer of Gaza's civilian population as a solution to Israel's post-war security concerns. The point of reading these statements is not that it reflects Israeli government policy, let alone the views of a majority of Israelis, but that it shows there are extremist voices in Israel and even in the Israeli government that are undermining the possibility of peace and inflaming the mistrust Palestinians have for Israelis. Israel's current Netanyahu government coalition with the religious right wing is the most extreme in Israel's history. It remains to be seen whether Israelis will tolerate this governing coalition's policies and security failures, though, based on current polls and protests, it appears they will not. Thank you for continuing to watch this series. We hope you got a better understanding from this episode of how religious extremism makes the path to peace so much harder. If you'd like to leave a comment or get in touch, visit our website at www.getthefactsmiddleeast.com. There's more to learn, so we hope you'll move on to episode 26, where we'll take a closer look at how irresponsible and biased media makes things worse. Thank you for joining us. We appreciate your interest in learning more about the war in Gaza. And remember, where there is no knowledge, there can be no insight.